In this video, we're going to talk about access specifiers of members of a class in C#. As you have seen earlier, that data members or any other members in the class, such as constructed as well as methods, can have private access specifier. By default, any member is private inside class. Now, apart from private, there could be other access specifiers such as public and internal, as well as protected and protected internal. In this video, we're going to talk about three of them: private, public, and internal. Once we talk about inheritance, we'll discuss about protected and protected internal too. So, by default, any member inside a class is private. You must declare with other keywords in order to make them either public or internal. Otherwise, if you do not mention private, by default, any member is private. So you can also declare with private keyword too. Doesn't make sense because by default, you know, they are all private, right? Now, if I make one of the data member public or any other member as public, what does that mean? That means that when you create an instance of a class, such as I did in class demo console application, when I create an instance of a class, at that point of time, I can access any publicly accessible member via the class reference. Better to say, not class reference, via the reference of the instance or reference to the instance. In this case, person reference is the instance variable pointing to the person instance or object. So you, as you have seen in my earlier example, you can call this method get person details, as because that's a public method, and get the output and get it printed. So simply any public member can be called via the reference variable, but any private member cannot be called via the instance reference variable. Private members are supposed to be accessed within the class code, as I have accessed these data members within the constructor using this keyword, as you can see, right? So they are not accessible outside the class, whereas public, internal, they are accessible outside the class. Now, internal, that's a very interesting keyword, as because, say for example, I declare one of the member as internal, right? So can you access it inside the class? Yes, because any member can be accessed within the class. There is no problem about it. But what about accessing an internal member? Let me see. First of all, since I made a change, so I'll just go ahead and build the person library. After that, let me try to access this person location also here. As you can see, with person reference variable, if I put dot, I do not have any access to it. That means they are not publicly accessible via the reference variable, just like any private data member. But suppose, say, I do have this sample class, and then inside this person reference dot, if I put, interestingly, I can access the person location. You must remember that sample class has been declared within the same person library, and they have access to that person location via the reference variable. That means, and obviously you can assign some kind of value to it. For example, you can assign, say, Mumbai. That means that person class's internal member, whether it's a data member, a constructor, or method, it doesn't matter, is just like a public data member or public member, better to say. That means they're accessible within the same application, but they cannot be accessed from other application, as if with respect to the other application, this member suddenly has become a private data member. So let me conclude it. Internal data member is accessible only within that application, right? It behaves like a public data member, but within that application. Any member declared with internal keyword will behave in the same fashion. Now, as soon as you try to access this member from outside the class via the reference variable, you will not be able to do that as if this member has become private. Okay? Apart from that, public keyword, if you declare any member with public keyword, what will happen is that that particular member is accessible via the reference variable either in a separate application or even without the same application, as you can see with respect to the methods or constructor, etc. And a private data member where the member is accessible only within the class, not accessible out from outside the class using a reference variable. Okay, so be it in the same application or be it in the different application, this behavior of private doesn't change. Simply the private data member cannot be accessed outside the class. As I have told you, protected and protected internal will be discussed once we have covered inheritance. So these are different types of access specifier for data members, whereas only for class there are two access specifiers, public and internal. And for class members, we have got private, public, and internal, apart from these two that I am about to discuss a little later in a different video.